Hi, my name is Brian, and I'm the High Pop Professor. And today we are taking a short drive, and I had a couple thoughts on my mind, and wanted to talk a little bit about comps and a little bit about emotion in the hobby. And I just wanted to toss a few ideas out there. And so, it's funny. I know in a previous video of mine, I had talked about comps sort of, not really existing anymore. And, people have talked about comps not being as important maybe as they used to be at some other time. And I wanted to discuss that a little bit because it's not that they're useless, and it's not that they don't exist, and it's not that you can't find good ones. It's just that there's something interesting that tends to happen. It's that, I sort of pride myself in, taking an auction of a card that's ending soon and sort of predicting, okay, where do we think this card's going to end up? And, I just had someone had sent me a message just the other day, a fellow Greg Maddux collector, had asked me what value I would put on a specific card. And I kind of I like being asked that kind of question because it's sort of fun, because I can try to look for previous sales, I can look for sales of other players in that set, I can check completed listings, I can check 130 point, I can check, I don't subscribe to Card Ladder or Market Movers, but even without that, I feel like I can get a pretty good number most of the time. It's a little bit of an art, a little bit of a science. And I texted him back the same day and said, anything above this number feels too high, anything below this number feels too low. That's what we're looking for. And so that was that. Now, that being said, there are times, that's the sort of the crux of the whole problem, right? Is that the way that I would go about calculating comps and figuring out, because again, this is kind of like poker. It's a game of incomplete information. We can't go into the future in time and see what a card will end for. We can use the information we have at our disposal to put together the pieces of the puzzle and create the clearest picture that we can. But it's not ever going to be a full, complete picture. Again, no one has a crystal ball here. So, my default approach to this is a very systematic one, a logical one, one that is measured and reasoned, and therein lies the problem. There's the crux of the whole issue, is that people are emotional. People do not always act rationally when they are bidding on a card. They just don't. They don't. And especially if it's a card that's a rare one, especially if it's one that does not pop up but once every couple years. And so it's one of those things where you have something rare, you have something of very low population, it does not come up, maybe it's never come up before, who knows? You're kind of in this uncompable territory. You don't really know, you're kind of flying blind. Anyone's best guess what you're gonna have to do here. So anyway, I wanted to discuss just a handful of auctions and that had recently come to fruition that sort of exemplify this, because in some ways some of them could be predicted, but not always. And some of them took me by surprise. Some of them took me way by surprise. And so I just wanted to discuss that because, as much as I might pride myself on trying to come up with reasonable comp numbers, there are plenty of times where I am just flat out wrong. I mean, completely way off base. And when that happens, and it does happen, that interests me. So I think of that as kind of a really neat, it's an interesting, I think of it as an opportunity for learning, but it also helps to recalibrate my own senses. And anyway, so I wanted to talk about 3 auctions that had just finished. The first one I wanted to discuss was actually one I was pretty close on guessing. There was recently a 96 Topps Chrome refractor of Greg Maddux in a PSA 10 that was listed for sale. Now, this 96 Topps Chrome set is almost impossible to get in a PSA 9, okay? And so 10s are just forget it. You're not gonna find them there. And so, all of these cards are gonna be like single-digit populations. They almost don't exist. All right. So this card, in a PSA 9 would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $300. And so the 10, I guessed that it would be pretty close to about $1,000. And yeah, it did. It finished for a little over $1,100. That was $1,150 or so. And so yeah, I was able to sort of, somewhat in the right ballpark get that one. And again, because they are that tough to get. The centering was not very good. They had, of course, hulking issues, condition issues. Those are the two biggies. But of course, you still had refractor lines, print lines, pock marks, surface scratches, what have you, because it's a chromium card and it's one of the earlier refractors. The second sale that happened, there's three of them here, but these last two, really, really surprised me. And so the second one that I want to discuss was the, recently, I'm going to make another video about this because recently someone had, I'll just give the card, but really it was an entire set. And it was a 93 Donruss Diamond Kings autograph of Darren Daulton. And this is a card that probably wouldn't be on anyone's radar, but if you are a set collector and a Diamond King autograph collector, then you probably already know. So Darren Daulton is one of the toughest guys to get. Namely, he's no longer with us. He died about 8 years ago now, somewhere around there. And he was never much of a signer to begin with, I don't think. And so, anyway, there are very few of these cards autographed by him out there. And so when one does pop up, it's gonna fetch a premium. So, as this auction was going, I watched it, not because I was going to bid on it. I'm not actually collecting this set, but at the same time, I was curious, where was this thing going to end up? And so I had my guess, and I was guessing that this thing would probably finish a little, between 150, maybe 100, 150. And boy, I was just flat out wrong. This thing ended up finishing at $521. $500, over $500, and that just shocked me. I was way off base on this one, and I really can't imagine spending over $500 on a Darren Daulton card. And yet, there are multiple people. Again, this was the one bid increment over the second highest bidder's max bid. I don't even know what the mega bid was that won this thing, but I am confident that this was not shill bid. I believe this was a legitimate, authentic sales price, and I think that someone out there really, really wanted to complete their set, and that this might have been the last one. Which again, it ties emotion back into this. When you're close to completing a set or a run or whatever, and those last few that you need, that desire, that drive, it grows within you. And when you can see the finish line that close ahead of you, it makes you strive all the harder to reach it. And so I think this is a very human thing. This is a very, and again, it kind of flies in the face because logic and cold calculation will tell you, hey, just wait around for another one, be patient, it'll come up. Yeah, but we are emotional creatures. We are. And we're going to let that get the better of us at all times, or if we're not, at least mindful about it, right? So anyway, that one completely shocked me. And the third and final example that I wanted to discuss real quick here was actually a Ryne Sandberg card. Now, recently we've of course heard the news that unfortunately he is no longer with us and lost his battle to cancer, and we know he had been fighting that for quite some time. But But interestingly, this auction, this was for a card of his that this actually happened a week before his passing. And so this was not, so sometimes, like with Ricky Henderson last year, how it felt like his rookie card doubled in value overnight, after he passed away. That's not what's happening here. This was not the case, all right? The issue here was that this was a card, 93 Stadium Club first day production in a PSA 10. Now, this is a card where, it's a 1 per box insert, fairly big set, so pretty tough true odds to get your guy. And of course, Ryan Sandberg, being a perennial all-star, one of the best second basemen to play the game, I can see this card being pretty popular. And you can buy, this is the kind of a card you can probably buy for about, $10, ungraded all day long. Now, PSA 10, that's a tougher one to get, okay? That's, again, we're looking at single-digit pops. And had you asked me what this card would sell for, I would have probably said somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 80 to 150, somewhere in there, depending. I could see it being a $100 card for sure. But I was off. And I was way off. And so if you had told me that this card sold for $220, I'd have been, whoa, I'd have been kind of surprised. If you would have told me this card sold for $375, I'd have been, whoa, that would have been crazy. But no, this card sold for $800. $800. Okay, $795, but whatever. $800. What the heck? How did that? What? So this is, we just don't know. And it's funny because there's another PSA 10 from the same set. There was, of a similar caliber, similar tier of player, Kirby Puckett, that actually did finish in that sort of reasonable range of about 100-ish, And so this kind of just goes to show, a lot of times, it doesn't happen all the time, but there happen times where emotion is going to drive the sale. I do not believe this was either. I don't believe that this one also was shill bid. I don't see why anyone would think that there would be a second underbidder at $790. Like, I don't understand. It really just does not make sense for that to happen. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of work that through, because it's funny. However much we think we know the market, however much we think we have our idea, our conception of what comps are, how they work, we just never know. There is an X factor that is emotion, because it runs counter to logic and reasoned thought processes, and it's always going to be present in this hobby. And so, just let that be a lesson. Let that be something that we are aware of. And no matter how much we think we know a market, just know that anomalies like this can and do happen. Thanks for watching.